The pearls were always the hardest part. My fingers shook as I fastened the clasp behind my neck, the delicate chain slipping twice before I finally caught it. The necklace wasn't valuable, not in the way people mean, but Harold had given it to me on our 40th anniversary. He'd said it made me look exactly like the woman I married. I wore it every New Year's Eve after that, even last year, when he was too weak to notice. This year, I would wear it alone. The navy blue dress still fit, though the sleeves sagged a little where my arms had softened. Harold used to say the color brought out my eyes. I checked the mirror, adjusted the neckline, then reached for the lipstick I'd saved for special occasions. Burgundy, bold, a little too much for someone my age, Iris once hinted, but Harold had liked it, and I wasn't getting dressed for Iris. Le Jardin was the most elegant place in Asheville I could find that still took reservations this late in the season. Linen tablecloths, real candles, a Bordeaux list Harold would have spent 20 minutes debating over. It cost more than I should have spent on one meal. But it wasn't just a meal. It was a gesture, a signal to my family that I was still here, still willing to try, still believing that even after everything, maybe especially after everything, we could sit around one table and remember. We belonged to each other. The reservation was for 6. I'd asked them weeks ago. No one had said no. I gathered my purse, checked my phone for the 10th time. Still no messages. Then I reached for my coat. And the first call came through. The phone buzzed just as I reached for my coat. Hey. Mom, sorry to do this last minute. Lena's feeling off, maybe something she ate. We think it's best to lay low tonight. Happy New Year, though. Let's catch up soon. No voice. Just a text. Nathan had always been more comfortable when he didn't have to hear my reaction. I stood frozen in the hallway, the message blinking up at me like a warning light. I told myself not to overthink it. Kids get sick. Plans change. I slipped my arms into the sleeves of my wool coat, pressed the front flat, and reached for my keys. The phone rang next. I'm sorry, Evelyn, Iris said. Her tone was too smooth, too prepared. Nathan said he let you know. It's been such a long day. Honestly, I think we all just need a quiet night in. But thank you for thinking of us, thinking of them, as if this dinner hadn't been planned for weeks, as if I'd just made a passing offer they were politely declining. I barely made it out the door before the third call came. Gran, I'm really sorry. Lena's voice mumbled. I didn't know Mom and Dad were going to bail, but I don't feel great either. Hope it's okay? She didn't wait for my response. The line went dead. By the time I reached Le Jardin, my stomach had curled in on itself. The hostess smiled politely when I gave her the name. 6. Correct, yes, I said. But it'll just be me tonight. Her smile faltered. But she led me to the center of the dining room, where a wide round table sat under a chandelier that shimmered like ice. I asked her to leave the place settings, all 6. I ordered a bottle of Bordeaux, Harold's favorite, and picked at the bread while families around me raised glasses and passed dishes. One table over, 3 generations laughed over a shared dessert. The grandmother at their center was glowing. Her daughter leaned in close. Her grandson nestled against her side. My chest tightened as I lifted my glass. The wine stung going down. I didn't cry. Not at first. But when the entrees arrived and I had to tell the waiter, no, it's still just me. The tears began to slip, soft and slow, one after the other. And then I heard the doors swing open behind me, running footsteps. I turned just in time to see Noah pushing past the maitre d', his coat half-zipped, cheeks flushed red from the cold. His eyes found me instantly. Grandma, he said, a little too loud for the quiet elegance of the room. Heads turned. I stood, napkin still in hand, as he weaved through tables toward me. The staff tried to stop him, but he didn't slow down. One hand clutched his chest, the other held a thick, crumpled envelope. When he reached me, he didn't speak right away. His chest rose and fell, trying to catch his breath. His hair was damp with sweat at the edges. He looked like he'd run all the way across town. "Noah," I asked, stepping toward him, "what's happened? Are you all right?" He shook his head. "I had to find you. I couldn't let them go through with it. Not again." "What do you mean? What are you talking about?" "They're at Romanelli's," he said, finally catching his breath. "All of them. Mom, Dad, Uncle David. They've been planning this for weeks. Tonight wasn't just a coincidence. The dinner, they used it to keep you out of the will reading." My knees weakened. I sat down quickly. Noah dropped the envelope on the table between us. "It came this afternoon, from Harold's lawyer. To Mom's house. She didn't tell you. They waited until you'd be gone to open it without you." He wiped his nose with his sleeve, eyes shining now. "Not from the cold. I read it. I know I shouldn't have, but I had to. There's more in here than just the will. Grandma, there's something else. You need to see it." I stared at the envelope like it might catch fire. My fingers trembled as I reached for it. Sliding it closer. "They don't know I left," he said. Softer now. "I told them I was going to the restroom. I ran. I didn't think, I just knew I couldn't let them keep doing this." My throat tightened. Words caught somewhere behind my ribs. He met my eyes and said, "I couldn't let them do this to you again." I opened the envelope. Inside was the last thing I ever expected to find. The will was on top, clipped neatly with a yellow tab. Noah sat beside me now. Quiet, his breath finally steady. The restaurant had faded into a blur, the clink of glasses and laughter turning into a kind of background hum. I read Harold's name first, bold and familiar, then mine. Everything. It said, the lake house, the accounts, the investments, all of it to me. Nothing for the children, unless I passed first, in which case it would go directly to the grandchildren, not the middle generation, not the ones who plotted this dinner like it was a chess move. They told me he left it to them. I murmured. They were so sure. Noah didn't respond. He just slid the next document forward. I stared at the heading, Paternal DNA Analysis Report. I skimmed faster than I should have, my eyes catching the key lines. No biological relationship detected between Noah Grayson and Iris Mercer. I blinked. "I'm not her son," Noah said, his voice low. "She adopted me when I was 2. Told everyone I was a distant cousin's kid. Said I was family. Said it'd be easier if no one knew. But why would she? Money." His jaw tightened. "You and Grandpa were generous with your real grandkids. School fees, clothes, Christmas. She knew if you thought I was blood, you'd help. So she made me part of the story, trained me to play along." He looked down at the floor. "I didn't know the truth until recently. I found papers in her closet. I didn't say anything. I thought maybe being loved was worth not asking questions." I closed the folder with shaking hands. "Do you hate me now?" he asked. I turned toward him. He looked like a boy still, despite all the secrets he carried. But in his eyes, I saw something I hadn't seen in a long time. Truth. Unvarnished and brave. "No," I said softly. "I don't. Because somehow, in the middle of that beautiful lie, this boy had been the only one who came looking for me. And maybe that meant he was the only one who ever really saw me." I pushed my half-full glass aside and reached for my coat. The drive home was quiet. Noah sat beside me in the passenger seat, still holding the envelope in his lap as if it might vanish if he let it go. I kept my eyes on the road. But my mind was miles behind us. I thought of every time I'd said yes when I should have said wait. Every time I'd signed a check I couldn't afford to write. when Iris needed money for Noah's special tutoring. I pulled from my retirement, when Nathan said they were behind on their mortgage. I didn't even ask why. David, who never called unless something was wrong, once cried to me over the phone about needing help with a medical emergency. It turned out to be credit card debt from a cruise. I thought that was love, giving without keeping score. But maybe that's how they knew I'd never stop. Maybe that's how they learned to chip away without guilt. I remembered sitting at the kitchen table while Harold read another message from one of them. His eyes narrowed. Did David mention what hospital he asked once? I had shrugged. No, but he sounded panicked. Harold began recording phone calls a few months later. Said his hearing was getting worse. He made them speak up on speakerphone. I thought it was about age. I thought it was harmless. I remember walking in on him once, staring at a notebook filled with dates and names. When I asked, he just smiled and said, I'm making sure we remember everything. I hadn't seen what he was building. At night, when he was too tired to speak, he'd take my hand and hold it until he fell asleep. Now, I wondered if it was his way of apologizing for seeing what I wouldn't, for planning behind my back, for knowing how our children would behave before I let myself believe it. The silence in the car wasn't cold. It was full of things unsaid. Noah finally rested his head against the window. I didn't know where the truth would take us next, but I knew I was done pretending it hadn't been there all along. When we stepped inside my apartment, I turned on the hallway light and told him, You can stay the night. Noah slept on the pullout in the den. I offered the guest room, but he shook his head like he didn't want to take up too much space. He'd been raised to stay small, to be useful, not comfortable. I made tea while he changed into some old clothes I'd saved from when Nathan was a teenager. They hung loose on him, but he didn't complain. We sat at the kitchen table while the radiator knocked in the walls, both of us too full of thoughts to pretend at small talk. I should have told you sooner, he said, eventually, stirring his tea though he hadn't added anything to it. But I didn't know how. I wasn't sure what it would mean. You're 17, I said gently. It's not your job to manage adults. He looked up. That's the thing. It kind of was. Mom. She always had this way of prepping me before we saw you. What to say, what not to bring up, how to mention stuff we needed without sounding like we were asking. I nodded slowly. She knew how to make it feel like helping was my idea. Exactly. I took a sip of tea and exhaled through my nose. The old ache behind my eyes had returned, but it felt different now. Less like grief, more like heat. Noah hesitated. There's something else. I waited. They're not just trying to ignore the will, they're planning to challenge it. And you. I set my cup down. They're going to say you're not mentally stable, that you're showing signs of decline, that Grandpa was manipulated into changing the will. They're trying to get control of everything: bank accounts, the house, even guardianship. I stared at the window above the sink. The reflection of my face looked unfamiliar, tired. Yes, but sharper now, focused. And me. He said, they're calling me a fraud, saying anything you or Grandpa gave me was under false pretenses. They want to void it all. Pretend I never existed. I felt the shift as clearly as if someone had pulled a lever in my chest. There was no more room for hope. No more space for apology or confusion. Only choice. I stood, walked to the living room, and pulled open the drawer where Harold used to keep his old address book. It was cracked leather, the spine worn soft from years of use. What are you doing? Noah asked. I flipped past the names until I found it. Alden Prescott, Esk, Harold's lawyer. Not just a name now. A lifeline. It's time, I said. My voice quiet, but steady. They need to learn who they're really dealing with. I turned the page and ran my finger down the number. Then I picked up the phone. Prescott's office was tucked behind a bank downtown. Quiet and unimposing. Just the way Harold liked things. Mr. Prescott himself opened the door when we arrived. He was older than I remembered, though perhaps I was only seeing him now through the eyes of someone newly awake. "Mrs. Mercer," he said with a gentle nod. Mr. Mercer prepared for this day more thoroughly than any man I've ever known. We sat across from him in a room lined with books and silence. Noah kept his hands folded in his lap, still as stone. I could feel his tension, but he said nothing. Prescott opened a drawer and placed a thick folder on the desk between us, then another, then a small digital recorder. Harold was concerned, he said carefully, that his wishes might not be honored. He began collecting evidence well before he changed the will. These are recordings, phone calls, family meetings. He said he started using speakerphone more often, claiming his hearing was going. What they didn't know was that he was recording everything. He pressed play. Nathan's voice filled the room, calm, smug. "She's been repeating herself lately. It's time we step in before she does something reckless with the estate." Then Iris. "We'll need medical documentation. I know a doctor who can be discreet. David, once we get control, we can reallocate the investments. I've already spoken to a financial advisor." I felt my breath leave me like a gust through an open door. Prescott paused the recording. "There are more. 12. In total. All time-stamped. All admissible." He opened another folder and turned it toward me. Bank records. Amounts I didn't even remember, giving them each one matched to purchases that had nothing to do with need. Spa visits, travel agencies, retail boutiques. Then he handed me a sealed envelope, Harold's handwriting on the front. I recognized it instantly. I broke the seal and unfolded 3 cream-colored pages. "My darling Ev, if you're reading this, it means our children have done exactly what I feared they would. I want you to know this is not your failure. You gave them everything. They failed to see the gift. That's on them, not you. I've done what I could to protect you. Every dollar left is yours. Every measure taken is for your freedom, your dignity, your peace. You don't have to fight. But if you choose to, I've made sure they cannot win. You are not alone in this. Even now, all my love, always. Harold." I folded the letter and pressed it to my chest. Prescott slid the final folder forward. "This is the clause your husband added," he said. "Any heir who contests the will, or your competency, forfeits their claim entirely. Their share returns to you." I looked at Noah, whose eyes were glassy but wide with something else now relief. I set the letter down, smoothed the corner of the paper, and exhaled. "We'll need copies of everything," I said. The house was still when we returned. Noah went to the den without a word, closing the door softly behind him. I stood in the kitchen for a long moment, Harold's letter still folded in my hand. Before I reached for the phone, I called Nathan first. He picked up on the second ring. "Mom, thank God. Listen, whatever you heard, it's exactly what I heard," I said. "And I've heard enough." There was a pause. "This doesn't have to get ugly." "No, it doesn't." I agreed, which is why I'm ending it now. I won't be your excuse, or your bank, or your burden. "Mom, come on, I'm done," I said simply. "I wish you well, but you won't be hearing from me again." I hung up before he could respond. Next was Iris. Her voice trembled with polished outrage. "You're choosing him over your own family." "I'm choosing myself," I said. "For the first time in a very long time," she sputtered. "But I didn't stay on the line," David answered with a sigh. "So, this is it. We're all just cut off. You cut yourselves off," I said. "I just stopped pretending you didn't." I set the phone down after the third call, a quiet finality settling over me. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was clean. I walked to the window, watching the trees shift outside as the light softened across the lake. For years, I had begged for scraps of love from people who only came when they needed something. Now, they knew I wasn't waiting anymore. Behind me, I heard the soft creak of the den door. Noah's footsteps moved closer, slow and uncertain. Noah stayed, not just for the weekend or the spring. He unpacked slowly, one drawer at a time, until the house felt different, lighter. Somehow, we didn't talk about what had been taken from us. We focused on what was left, and what could still be built. He enrolled at the local art school in Asheville, said he wanted a fresh start. I didn't press. I just drove him there the first day, watched from the parking lot until he disappeared through the front doors. When he came home, there was charcoal on his fingertips and something new in his posture direction. We brought the lake house back to life together, painted walls that hadn't seen color since Harold's hands touched them, repaired cabinets, restained the deck. I planted lavender in the front beds again, the way Harold liked it. Noah built a birdhouse for the back porch. Every morning, I watched him fill it. Neighbors started stopping by. Some remembered Harold, most didn't. That didn't matter. They brought over pies, stories. Sometimes nothing but conversation. The house, once so silent, began to fill with voices that weren't asking for anything. I set up a charitable fund in my name. Harold would have liked that. The children's hospital, the women's shelter, the library's literacy program, not for recognition, but for meaning. The money was his legacy. What I did with it would be mine. Some nights, Noah and I would sit on the porch and say nothing at all, just listen to the lake, the wind, the world carrying on like it always had. One evening, he handed me a drawing. It was of me at the stove, him at the table, the morning sun pouring through the window like it was trying to bless the room. And that's when I knew this house was home again. The stars were out, scattered like quiet reminders above the lake. Noah sat beside me on the porch swing, his knees pulled close, sketchbook resting against them. He didn't speak as he flipped to the final page, just turned it gently and held it out. It was us. Me at the stove, apron tied crookedly like always, head tilted as if listening. Him at the table, leaning forward, hands mid-gesture. The morning sun spilling through the kitchen window like it had been invited. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. And I saw myself the way he saw me. Still here, still worthy. I ran my hand across the paper's edge. You weren't born mine, I said softly. But you were meant to be. He didn't answer. But his smile told me he'd been waiting to hear that. My phone buzzed against the table. Nathan's name. Again. I pressed silence. Noah looked at me, question rising in his eyes. I didn't let it settle. I think, I said, reaching for Harold's old notebook. It's time we built that garden your grandfather dreamed of. He nodded, and we stood together, already picturing the first rows,